Welcome back to the podcast, Harrison. A little chilly up there in Fairbanks. Last time we talked, you said that it had been too cold. I think it was around zero, maybe teens or something like that, but now it's been legit cold lately.
Yeah, we've had a cold snap for the past 2.5, 3 weeks, pretty much almost since the first week of, or end of January, really. It's been really terrible. Right now, it's a nice 18 below, but we've had 2.5, almost 3 weeks of solid 35 to 45 below. Even we've been seeing a couple. I think I've seen it 3 times so far in the past few weeks that it's been 50 below.
And that's not super uncommon. It's just you may or may not have that every year. Is that kind of how the winters go?
Yeah, when I was a kid growing up here, like I remember around Halloween and even trick or treating that it would regularly be 20 below and just absolutely miserable. And, it was very common to have there'd be long cold snaps of multiple weeks of 40 below, at least 30 below, and down to 40 below for a couple weeks straight. But really the past, I don't know, 5 to 8 years, we haven't really been seeing any big cold snaps. Our cold snap will maybe be like 30 below for 2 or 3 days, or might hit 40 below for a day and then warm back up. But this has been a pretty good cold snap that reminds me of my childhood.
Yeah, when I was up there in March a couple years ago, it was negative 30 for, I think, the first day that I was there. And then the day that we hunted, it was negative 30. It started off negative 30, but then throughout the day it got warmer. And then by the time we got home, it was like negative 6, so it warmed up throughout the day. But that's brutal, man. It's been last night. I was kind of worried I didn't turn on the heat trace in our water pipes, but then I checked at like midnight. It was one of those things you wake up like, oh crap, man, I didn't put the heat tape on. It's been cold, and it was going to get clear. So anytime that it's clear here means that wind's coming out of the north. It's going to be colder, which is why it's clear. But yeah, it stayed at about 33 last night, so I didn't have to run down and turn the heat tape on.
Yeah, lucky you. I mean, there are people here in Fairbanks whose propane were freezing, and propane turns to liquid at 46 below zero.
Ugh.
And so there are tons of people around me, my neighbors and stuff, who would wake up one morning and all of a sudden they couldn't cook food anymore off their stovetop because it's run off propane.
Ugh. Are you hauling your water, or is it city water, or?
It is city water, but we do haul it. And by haul it, I mean, we essentially live in a dry cabin. That's not glamorous at all. So our water system, we get 5 or 6 5-gallon buckets of water, or 5-gallon jugs of water. And then I put a hose to an RV pump in it. And that's what puts water out my sink. And then it just drains into a 5-gallon bucket. So, I mean, we don't deal anything with water freezing, that kind of deal. It's very rudimentary.
Yeah, that's freaking hardcore. The place that you used to be at, you would haul your water. And so how big was that tank in the back of your truck? I don't know if people haven't listened to this podcast before. I try to get some of the authentic Fairbanks nonsense or chores that you have to deal with there. So you had a huge tank in the back of your truck, and you go to this water dispensing station. And Fairbanks does have running water for residents if you're on the city water. But if you are outside of certain limits, it wasn't like you were really, really far out of town. But you have to go get your water, and then there was a holding tank underneath the house, and then you'd pump it in from there. Okay, explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so since we just weren't on like flat ground in town, they don't want to be running water pipes up and around hills and stuff and through woods and all kinds of crap. So yeah, we just had a 1,500-gallon holding tank that was buried underground, that was hard piped into our house just through a pump. And I had a 175-gallon water tank in the bed of my truck that I would go to this fill station and fill it up and everything. And, it only cost a few bucks to fill it up. And then luckily at the time that I was doing that for the majority of my time at that house, I worked really close, so I could just get off work, take like a 2-minute detour, grab some water, then go home and dump it. And it was just a gravity feed system out of the tank in the bed of my truck down into the tank in the ground. But you just had to, you know, do it throughout the year. It costs like 2.5 cents or 2.2 cents a gallon if you buy it and pump it yourself. But if you have the company come and do it for you, it's like 9 cents. So I mean, it's a quite drastic difference. You know, it either costs you $30 to fill it, or $90 to fill it, essentially, if you want to do it yourself, or if you want to have the company do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a pain in the winter because, like, it had a spigot spout at the end of it, so you'd have to, like, in the wintertime after it was done, you'd have to lift it up and put a wood block under there to make all the water shift towards the back so it wouldn't freeze everything. And then even then, trying to do your best, you'd still have to bring the hose back inside sometimes to thaw it out and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
It just got to be a pain.
Yeah. And then how's the warmth in the cabin now?
How's the what?
How's the warmth in your cabin now?
Oh, it's moderate. If your feet are on the ground downstairs when it was 40 below, it's not going to be fun. So you're mostly sitting on the couch and stuff when you're down here, or wearing slippers or whatever. House Crocs were very valuable when it was 40 below here.
How the kids take it? They go outside and play at all, or what's the?
Oh, they don't care. They don't care. They get cooped up a little bit. When it's 40 below, they'll be out for like maybe 2 or 3 minutes. They will force themselves to go outside. I won't force them, but they want to go play, so they go outside and they're like, no, this is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Got to put little booties on the dog just to go to the bathroom and everything. And
yeah,
because he's a baby, he's not a real dog.
When you're a kid, you just kind of respond to the environment that you have. So you complain about anything anyway, but when it comes down to it, you want to play. So yeah, it's just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, that's like my childhood for trick or treating, with friends and stuff at 20 below. It's like, all right, we're here. Let's just run from house to house, get this over with as fast as possible, and then we'll go home.
Yeah. Remember the first time we went to Skagway on a basketball trip? It was really cold there. It was down in the negatives somewhere. It's super bad wind chill, or a wind coming down the Lynn Canal. And we were walking around. I think it was a senior, and there was some frozen dog poop. And then, of course, us from southern and southeast, like, well, what happens, man? This thing is really, really frozen. It's well below zero. Wind chill is negative 20 or 30 or whatever it was, and it's super dry. What's going to happen if you pick up this piece of dog poop? Is it going to smell at all? Is it going to melt in your hand just a little bit? And is it going to get on your hand? And so, of course, we said, hey, one of our underclassmen, maybe a freshman, say, go chuck that, see if it shatters. And he picked it up and he smelled it. No, doesn't even smell. And then threw it on the ground and it didn't shatter. It just kind of hit like a rock. But I was like, oh, it's an experience. And that's, Skagway is not that far away. Skagway is, not even like latitude of Anchorage, but you're still talking close to a record of snow in January. And I think we had just the one storm where we got maybe 4 or 5 inches. So it's just wild that this is kind of the top end of kind of that warmer air, and then it mixes with that cold air, the low and the high pressure. And so we get crazy storms with wind and rain, but it's kind of the divider. It seems like the divider is about Wrangell, Petersburg area here in Southeast, where anything north of that, it's just all snow. And then south of that here, it's a little bit more warm air and a little bit less snow. Well, a lot less snow, actually.
Man, the thought of having like a real winter and being still so isolated in a place like Petersburg sounds miserable.
Yeah.
Versus Ketchikan, where it's a bit more mild or something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of a trade-off because, it'd be nice to have some of those winter sports. Yeah, to be able to take the skis out, to be able to snowshoe, to be able to, do all that stuff would be a lot of fun, but we don't get the snow for it. So, we get the rain and it's warmer, which is nice, but, sometimes it wouldn't be bad to be able to have some access to snow or get a little bit to be able to play around in. So it's just the same rainy crap that we get all year. At least Petersburg and Wrangell have Alaska Airlines too, so if you want to get out, you can get out. That's the nice thing about here in Ketchikan too is you can be. We made it down to Tucson and it was like a whole day because we had a long layover in Seattle. But you could go down to Seattle on the evening flight that leaves at 5:30, 5:20, something like that, and then you're down in if you would ever want to go to Seattle. But you could spend the weekend in Seattle just to kind of get out if you wanted to go shopping or go to Home Depot or Costco or something like that. You can be on the jet. You're down there, no sweat. There's hardly a drive to it. So some of those places you have to drive a long way, even Wasilla Palmer. If you want to get out of the state, you got to drive hour and a half to get to Anchorage, depending on traffic, park, and then fly. You know, it's pretty easy to get out of here. Same thing with Wrangell, Petersburg. So you can fly out and
How long is a flight from Ketchikan to Seattle?
hour and a half, hour 45.
Holy smokes, man.
Yeah, but trade-offs. Tons of rain, pretty miserable.
No road system.
Yeah,
You got to fly up to Fairbanks to go
yeah,
shoot stuff.
yeah, yeah. So actually, let's on that note, we want to talk a little bit about kind of the winter caribou. When I went up there, I think that was 3 years ago now. There was do they call this a fall quota and then a winter quota for the caribou in the 40-mile herd? And that's it's technically in summer, but do they call it fall quota?
Yeah, it would. I don't know if the fall one is considered a quota or not. I mean, I think they always do have a certain number of animals that they want harvested, and then it changes every year, and then they'll close it, and then I think sometimes they'll do winter surveys, aerial surveys, and see like, oh, we're seeing way more than we were anticipating, even though hunters claim they had taken this many caribou. Well, we see X number of caribou, and that's either too many or not enough. And so what they'll do is they'll then open up a winter quota if they want to harvest more. But it seems like they've been kind of on a rampage for the 40-mile caribou for the past 5 or 6 years, where it's like every year it's just the tag numbers just keep going up and up and up, and there's always seems to be a winter hunt. But there is this year, but it was kind of late.
Hmm.
At least for the road accessible parts, because that whole zone is cut into 4 different areas. So like zones 1 is along the Steese Highway, which is super accessible to people around Fairbanks. Zone 4, which is over by the Taylor Highway, down by Token, Chicken. And then there's zones 2 and 3, which are like these super isolated remote areas that sometimes people fly out to in the fall, or they'll boat up a river really, really far away to get up to that area. And generally the harvest rates in zone 2 and 3 are very, very small. Vast majority of the caribou are taken in zones 1 and 4, with a majority of them being taken in 1 usually.
Yeah, I talked to a biologist, and each zone has its own quota, and that the 4 and the 3 are rarely met just because of the lack of access. It's very difficult to access those areas. Whereas up on the Steese, it's just a slaughter early on. It doesn't sound like a lot of fun. I haven't done it, so I can't really judge. But from what people said, it's not the iconic caribou hunting experience that a lot of people would like to have.
Not in the fall. I don't go there in the fall anymore. That's just, there's too many people, and where you harvested your caribou was in zone 1.
Mm-hmm.
But of course that was March, and
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of people out there, so it was nice.
Yeah, and the people that were out there, that guy was super helpful. It was nice that he didn't have that same frenetic, well, I got to get mine. He asked if we had a pot to make some coffee, so we gave that to him. Then he told us where the caribou were, because we saw that he had a couple on his sled. We were about ready to go we were on our way back to Fairbanks, and we noticed that they had some caribou. Stopped by, rolled down the window. Hey, you got some caribou, and he said, you got a pot for coffee. Said sure, and gave it to him, and he told us where the caribou were, and that was it. And then he waited, which is pretty cool too. And that's a different sort of feel than you get from a lot of other hunts when it's competition. Whereas in that case, the guy was More than happy to help out as long as we were provided them with something and then they stuck around because it's pretty dangerous. You know, if you do have people that are leaving, it was not too long before sunset. So if it's super cold out there, you're a breakdown away from something bad happening. So the fact that he told us where they were at and then stuck around was pretty cool. And that's a feeling you get with hunting that doesn't always happen everywhere.
Very, very rarely happens. Yeah, that and when it is cold out there like that in the nighttime when it's dropping back down to the double digit belows, whether it's 10 below or 30 below, you're gonna die if you're not prepared. But at 30 below, you're just gonna die faster.
Yeah, it's pretty morbid, but true.
Oh, it is true. Like since I have been trapping this year in a kind of little bit more longer of an area to get to my trap line from where I unload my snow machine and everything, and is I'm starting to take a lot more precautions and take little emergency kits and whatnot and extra food, unfreezable first aid, lots of hand warmers. I still need to build a crate that I always keep with me that's going to have emergency sleeping bag, some kind of like bivouac type shelter type deal.
Hmm. So as far as that, going back to that caribou hunt there, when I did it, it was an over the counter. When did they go to this? It's kind of like a draw thing for residents.
Well, I think when they open up, so what happened was is that they did have an original um, opener for the winter in October. I think it was maybe October or November, and it was the RC tag, so it's registration or resident caribou or registration caribou tag, um, and that's the same number every year. It's like RC 867, I think, and it opens up. And they said that they didn't want any animals harvested in zones 1 or 4. So, if you applied for that tag, you could only hunt zones 2 and 3, which are the super gnarly remote ones. And so, it just went by the wayside. And I think they wanted like 300 caribou shot for the quotas for those 2 zones. And I think they maybe had gotten like 40.
Hmm.
Only 40 people had taken caribou and claimed it. So what they did is then, with very, very short notice, the last week of January, they posted something that it was like an AC 999 tag. So it's like a super specific targeted hunt. And they, did very little publishing on it to show that, they wanted it to happen. And because there was only 125 people or 125 tags that were going to be allocated for that to be for people to hunt in zones 1 and 4. And they even said whenever they were putting out the draw that a majority of the caribou were on zone 1 at the time, but I think a lot of them are gone now. But there was like 2,300 applicants for that hunt, so extremely low odds. Anyone who was an Alaska resident could apply. So you had people, from like Craig, Allakaket, uh, Huslia, Nome, Juneau, and everyone in between, like applying for this tag. That's like a pretty darn localized hunt. That'd be like someone like me living in Fairbanks, seeing that there's like an emergency opener for deer tags where it's just like you know, say, oh, Jeff could probably do that, but you know what? I want to do it. And I'm just going to do it on my own and take that tag opportunity potentially away from, a local resident like that. And it's like, is it legal? Oh yeah, that's fine. Because everyone's a resident, who cares? It's that type of deal. But at the same time, it's like, that's a little lame that there are people who are applying that, are more than likely, if they were to draw it, are never going to hunt it,
Hmm.
versus the people who like live around Fairbanks, North Pole, Salcha area. It's like, oh, that's, just a hour and a half, 2 hour drive. No problem.
Yeah.
We'll go that way and whack them and stack them or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting quandary or issue. Sometimes it's you start going down what would make the most sense, and it makes the most sense maybe to prioritize the locals in this case. But then if you start applying that across the board, that's exactly what we're seeing with some of those other caribou shutdowns, where it's only if you live in that area, you're not have federal subsistence, then you can't hunt it. So it's like, oh yeah. In this case, it would make a lot of sense if it was, just locals in this area, because again, if you are from, if someone from Ketchikan, if I were to draw it and I can't use it, that's another caribou that's unable to be taken by someone who lives in Fairbanks. But again, like, you're prioritizing one group of Alaskans over another, so it's kind of one of those things that you point out, think, oh, that kind of sucks. But as far
Yeah,
as this needs to change, it's like, I'm not going to go that far, because I know if you go down that road every single time, then you end up just inviting more regulation, and it's an interesting thing to talk about, maybe a little frustrating, but we see how it works the other way when you prioritize one group over others.
absolutely. Yeah. And I'm more belly aching more than I am anything. I'm not complaining that they need to do something, but I'm mostly just pointing out the fact that it's like, hey, look at this. It's quite interesting to see that, there are people who are applying who don't even live anywhere near there, who, it would cost them potentially hundreds, if not 1,000 or more dollars to fly from where they are up here. Do they have access to a snow machine? Are they going to do it all on foot? Then their success rates are going to go down if they, you know, don't have some kind of mechanical advantage at their disposal. There was even like one person who drew it who was an Alaska resident but does not live in Alaska. So that means
Mm.
it's a military guy who lives on some base who knows where, and applied for this tag. And it's like, oh yeah, are you going to be able to get your time off to fly from wherever you are in the world up here, go shoot something, and then bring it all the way back to wherever you are? It's highly unlikely, but
Hmm.
you know what? That opportunity was given to them, and they were lucky with the draw, and that's that. But it's that one is particularly egregious, more so than anything else, for people actually living here.
Yeah, if you can make it work, cool, it's great. But it is a winter hunt. It's not like me putting in for the toke tag for sheep and then not get it, or getting it and then not being able to hunt it. I don't know. I think Alaska is pretty good at allowing for belly aching and not necessarily trying to fix every problem in ways that end up creating other problems. We have a lot more control over these sort of things, and all these things that they try to do to fix things that ended up just being having unintended consequences. Up here, it's kind of up to us. I'm not going to be able to use it. I'm not going to put in for it because I'd be taking the tag from someone else. But
Yeah, I will say that that a lot of complaining doesn't get you very far, but unfortunately that's kind of there's been a few small handfuls of people and even individuals that have gone to the state and proposed stuff based on their statements of them being frustrated that they can no longer find moose anymore because there are too many hunters in their area. uh, for example, in Unit 13, which is a very huge, it's a pretty darn big zone with a lot of hunting opportunities, caribou, moose, bears, sheep, everything. That there was one guy who was hunting off the Denali Highway and had for many years, and he was used to hunting in one area. Well, you know, the Stephen Ranella effect of everyone getting into hunting late on, onset adult hunters and everything coming in and maybe shooting some moose that he may have taken very easily years past or something. Well, he put a proposal in for the Fish and Game, to close it. And by God, you know what they did? They closed that
mhm.
hunt for everybody, not just him, but for everybody. And then shortly after that, the tags have just, dwindled away, based partially on that and partially on population numbers. But then also they've taken away federal subsistence that wasn't available last year for anybody.
Mhm.
And so and then now you have everything going on in Unit 25 and 26 because of localized people saying, "Oh, we can't get our caribou out our front door anymore. Shut everything down."
Yeah.
You know, the non-residents flying around in airplanes are scaring the caribou away from their normal migrating patterns. Well, that's not true, but you know what? Sounds good enough, so they're
Yeah.
going to close everything.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate thing about what it ends up hurting is, like, when you have those people who are high profile that come up, they cast such a huge wake, and there's inevitably going to be people who have a lot of money who are able to do this. Since you have more shows, there's more exposure. So now, like, I don't know of anybody who's like hunting the Hall Road for like a show. It's take the haul road up and then fly out somewhere else. And so your common person who just finds out about a hunt. How can I get hunt caribou? All right, I'm going to fly to Fairbanks. I'm going to rent a U-Haul, and that's going to be the cheapest way. And I'm just going to go. And then you're going to be driving around with a whole bunch of other people who read the same post or who did the whatever. And meanwhile, everybody else that's doing their shows are flying out further and further and further. So like the common folk get pushed out even further. Again, that's total belly aching. But I did see a couple of people up on the haul road when I was up there with Ryan in U-Hauls, and there was one guy who was just by himself, and he looked super lonely. He just looked like kind of beaten down and sad, and there was this tiny bull that was just going back and forth on the road, and so we pulled off to the side to just kind of watch it. And he got out of the U-Haul and just he was kind of chasing the thing. It was like playing tag with it because the thing wouldn't run off. It would just kind of like run a little bit and then scamper back. It was more that it was upset about the or was freaking out because of the mosquitoes and the bugs than anything. And the guy then it finally ended up totally running off, and the guy just looked dejected and horrible, and he was just by himself. And we ended up seeing him at the store up in Dead Horse, and just kind of sad. He was buying a whole bunch of sugary and caffeine laced stuff, and I think we said hi to him, but it was just you want to have this really awesome experience, and you're picturing migrating caribou all over the place, and getting it and filming it, whatever, and it just doesn't happen like that. And saw another couple guys that were cruising around that they came down the same little spur that Ryan and I were at, glassing across the river. And Ryan and I had seen what looked like a couple of muskox, but we kept looking, put the spotter on it, and ended up being stumps. So like, oh, there's like 4 stumps. They fooled us. And these guys roll up and get out and start glassing like right next to us, but okay, whatever. And they glass. Oh, there's one. There's 2. There's about 6 of them over there. And we're like, are you looking at what we saw as stumps? Like what? And then they just took off, just like, look at these idiots that don't even know anything. It's just, so it was kind of weird. And then we camped out at a spot that there were 7 or 8 other people who were camping, mostly from out of state. There was one guy who brought up a really nice canvas tent, had a whole bunch of firewood, had brought the family up. So we talked to him a little bit. He's like, yeah, that's the key to driving all this way, is to keep the family warm and happy. And I thought that is awesome. Like I think he lived in Fairbanks or North Pole or something, but had driven up there, brought the family, and that was a cool experience. But now it's the haul road, and that's or fly out. And if you can't afford a fly out, it's kind of tough. But with 13 shut down, and with the 40-mile herd being a pretty radical hunt in the off the highway, it's hard to get to some of these spots. And I don't know. There's no like easy caribou tag and easy caribou experience.
No, there's not. And, with that whole Unit 13 being down, that was a very big area for a lot of people down in the valley of the, South Central people, Anchorage, Wasilla, Eagle River, Chugiak, all those places. That's where a lot of those people would go, is Unit 13 to hunt caribou. And with that gone, well, the next largest, most road accessible caribou hunt is the 40-mile hunt. And so you'd have all those people who were no longer able to hunt their normal stomping grounds, whether it be low population numbers or, tags being removed, or just opportunities altogether being removed for the year. So you know what they're going to do? Well, they're going to come up to the next area. And where's the next stop? That's Fairbanks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the Steese Highway for the 40-mile. And so in the fall time, you can just think of the normal amount of hunters going on to specific trailheads, because a lot of that area is locked down by BLM to where you just can't go wherever you want. There's certain trails that are, cut in for people to recreate on. And, they try and say as hard as possible, please do not make new trails. But people don't care. People don't listen anyway.
Yeah.
And so there are way more people than normal in that whole area. And so that's like for the fall, I don't even mess with it anymore. I don't go out there in the fall.
It's pain. Yeah, that's the reality of the situation. But yeah, that
And those
Nelchina
poor
herd just
caribou.
south of the Alaska range would have been perfect, or I'm sure was perfect for so many years. But now it's tough. Southeast, Prince of Wales really got a lot of attention for black bear and for deer. And then Kodiak got a ton of attention. It kind of became the new hip place. And there were people who would, on their shows, would say Kodiak's like a nice starter Alaska blacktail. It's just this, rather than make it sound like it was epic, because you're going to Alaska still. I mean, you're going to Alaska and you're shooting blacktail. But some of these people who'd been to so many of these huge hunts were talking about Kodiak blacktail deer like a nice starter hunt. Like, you're a little arrogant, a little cocky there, right? That's the exact same, or that's the type of attitude that a lot of the locals don't like when you're just selling this hunt. Oh, I've done it a bunch of times. It's cool. It's a nice starter, for you. You should go do it. That
And
the attitude sucks.
there's a particular social media influencer. I think his name is Gritty. The I I don't really follow him very much, but I've heard a lot of him. You know, years ago he was blowing up Arizona as like a, oh man, it's so easy to get here, get some
Mm,
preference points. You can hunt really sweet elk spots or mule deer or whatever, and then a coos deer, and then all of a sudden he starts blowing it up, and he's got a big reach, and then all of a sudden there's a ton of people all over the lower 48s that are starting to do that. And then all of a sudden he goes on, he's like, oh, now they're up in the preference points, it's too hard here.
mm-hmm.
I need to find somewhere else. And so he starts blowing up places in Alaska and like mentioning very hyper specific areas that are either known to locals and not known to many other people outside of Alaska. And he's doing the same thing now, where he's like, oh, Alaska is getting to be too tough for me to go do this very easily. I used to be able to do it 5-6 years ago. It's like, well, then shut up about it. Keep
Yeah.
it to yourself. Like, I'm sorry that you use social media to pay your bills, but you're ruining a resource to the people who live here. Not ruining it, but you're making it more difficult bringing in more people. And it's a double-edged sword, because I think non-resident tags pay for almost, it's well over 50% of
Yeah.
the state's budget when it comes to hunting, because our tags and everything, our fees are so low to hunt everything in the state, versus a non-resident tag could pay for multiple people doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. And there are some people who come up and they film and it's great stuff, and you really don't know where they're at. And that's cool. I like that. And as an outdoor, I make content, I write about stuff. I try to be as non-specific as possible. If you just talk about the haul road in general, then that's one thing. Versus here's exactly where to go. But yeah, that happened with I think Randy Newberg in Montana, where he was talking about all these great opportunities. And if you're saying, hey, if you're looking at getting in hunting or you want a different hunting experience, here's a great opportunity. If you're one of those first adopters, that's a great thing. That's one of the reasons why you watch that. So rather than this is something that I can do and you can't, and that was the old hunting shows used to be just this private land. And so you'd watch the show and it was, here's something I can't do because I can't afford it. They'd have the ad about whatever range or whatever outfitter they were using, and it was private land. Well, I don't have $15,000, so I'm not going to be able to do this. So I never really watched those shows very often because it was all private land. So when you have people start to do these public land things, it's so much more fun to watch. But there is that double-edged sword. You have so much more money that's being made because of people coming up here who are non-residents. But then if they happen to be very specific, then things could get a little bit hairy. Um, and
Yeah,
that's
and
that's
especially
that's
for
too
like,
bad.
especially for anyone who kind of knows or is like pretty darn dedicated to hunting, and they want to figure out certain states. Well, they can pay for a place like Hunting Fool, or they can look up public information on people who drew for that year, and so you can look up and see like, oh, I wonder who drew this. Okay, well, I'm going to write this down and see like, okay, he drew this tag, and I wonder if he's going to make a video about it. Okay,
Hmm.
he did. So now I can see the video. I can kind of discern where he is generally in that subunit or zone because of the video content that he did. He's not hiding peaks or mountains or whatever, and it can get pretty squirrely. That's kind of like been a big thing for a lot of people about sheep hunting is like keep your if you're videoing it and everything, it's like, yep, keep the angles down so you're not really showing a bunch of area. You're not showing big peaks that are like very discernible because they're much higher than everywhere else, that kind of thing. And so it's, I would imagine it'd be a really tricky situation for people who make money off of outdoor content like that.
Yeah, I think you even look at like Tyler Friel, he talks about sheep hunting all the time, but he is so careful because he doesn't want to ruin his own sheep spots. And like, when you listen to and you see the photos and everything, you're not going to recognize stuff. You're you're going to be able to enjoy a good podcast about it. But it doesn't mean that you should never talk about where you go. It's just having some, considering the people in that area who want to use it. I think that you're going to have a lot better relationship with the locals if and a lot less animosity if when you show up you kind of have that reverence and you're meet some people and you're kind and you represent the non-local hunter pretty well. I think there would be a lot less hunter conflicts. But yeah, I don't think anybody is going to be able to glean a whole bunch of stuff from Tyler's podcast about where to go, and that's purposeful, and that's to be able to tell the stories. People are going to enjoy listening, enjoy the content, enjoy reading about it, but not be able to triangulate exactly where he's at, and that's
Totally.
purposeful.
It's a delicate balance that you got to figure out, if you're going to be sharing content and that kind of stuff, is to not blow out your spot because, presumably if you shoot sheep somewhere, there's probably going to be more next year and more the following year. And so it's a place that you want to keep going back to. And if you're not careful, you can blow it out.
Yeah. I got a buddy in Huna who he spends his winters trying to figure out from all kinds of different markers and whatnot. And he just spends a lot. He's very meticulous, and he has found a couple spots where people have gone who were not forthcoming with details. But the amount of people who are going to be that disciplined or that whatever it is obsessed with it, there's not a whole lot of people out there. So even just like simple hiding of it, is just some people will use different footage so they're flying out in a certain direction, but then they use old footage from a different float plane or whatever, and then it's it totally throws people off. When I made that caribou film, I started it with being out there rather than how we got there as just a way of people then guessing. And then a couple people asked me just general questions. I said, I'm not, that's a little too specific. I don't want people to be able to figure it out. So I don't know. It's nice to be helpful. If people send direct messages, I might very vague, but I don't want to blow stuff up. Figure some stuff out for yourself.
Yeah. And there's a joy in that too, because I'd be lying if I had said that me and some of my friends have, if I were to say that we've never looked at videos and tried to figure out where someone had taken an animal from before. We've definitely been able to do that. And some of them are very easy to figure out as well.
Mm-hmm.
But, that takes, you're on like a conference bridge and you're like sharing your screen on Google Earth or, maps. And you're like, oh, what about this? Oh yeah, that looks like that. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fun aspect to that to be like, oh, cool. Now we know about another area, how to get into that specific location and go around this pocket instead of that or whatever. And it's fun, but also, I think that people try to hide a lot of stuff when it comes to sheep more than anything. And so even if there is another person out there who figures out where you've been or something, and they've either never hunted sheep before or gone sheep hunted, but never taken anything, you almost necessarily don't need to be worried about them in the sense of, oh, they're going to shoot my sheep, because nothing is yours, but people get that air about it. But also they're not going to probably be able to grit it out and go to where you were or where you are and where you plan to go and, actually successfully take something. Caribou is a bit different because whether it's a draw or over the counter, there's a lot of them versus sheep in very specific areas. There's probably not a lot.
Yeah, I think the expectation with sheep, people know that the chances are low just to be able to have an opportunity. Then when you get out there, the chances are low. And then if you happen to see someone else, like that's going to make things a little bit potentially chaotic, but you had one shot, not out from under you, but you were out there and you'd been looking at some, you had one shot, and then you had to find a different one. That's just kind of part of it. And obviously, there'd be some people who'd be probably pretty upset. I know that you were down, but it's there's a different sense of entitlement, and I can't imagine what it would be like to put forth that much effort and then have to find a different one.
Yeah, that specific time, it was like a guide who
Mm.
knew that area very, very well and was able to get something for his client. And then, we ran into a group of another three hunters that had walked into that drainage, and then they were like, "Oh, we didn't see anything, so we're turning around." And we just walked a mile past where they were, and we saw like four or five different bands. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, we're good to go.
Yeah.
And then we didn't see another person the entire rest of the hunt. So
Yeah, that's the thing about I spent some time just on X looking around, looking around, looking around, and inevitably someone has been there. Guides have been in there. Someone has walked in. Like there's nothing that is untouched or that is perfect. And then sometimes you're like, well, this would be great, and you just keep looking back further, 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 and before you realize that you're 15, 20 miles back. And then how do you get there? And this little pass here, is it actually doable? Or are you going to get cliffed out? And that's the stuff that you've talked about, and Tyler on his podcast talks about that a lot too. Like just the sheer amount of miles that it takes to do a sheep hunt. And if you happen to have a guide, and that's what most of the tags taken, I think the success rate was like 40% or something like that for a non-resident with a guide, or 40% or something like that with a guide. And then not, it's much lower than that. Or no, maybe 40% of the, I don't know, I'm just throwing numbers out here, throwing out numbers with, did you happen to know what the take is for sheep?
so so I think that in years past, I think harvest rates for guides were very high, 60 to 75%. And then, over the past few years, it's dropped down to like 40-ish% just because of, sheep numbers are down everywhere across the state, whether it's over the counter, a lot of tags, or very, very little tags, like down in 14C, where it's like, you know, 0.5% to draw those tags. Those places are down on sheep too. So, I mean, they're down everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Residents are like less than 10%, or maybe around 10% harvest.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what it
Or
was.
success rates rather, not harvest, success rates.
Yeah, that was the key thing. Because yeah, but 45% according to this thing that I got here. But that's with a guide. You're spending a lot of money. I can't remember what podcast it was that I was listening to. I think it may have been one of the older ones with Tyler and someone on there, um, talking about at these shows where these guides are selling sheep hunts, knowing full well that they're not going to be able to, or they're going to go to this area and it's going to be a very, very slim chance of getting a sheep, but selling the hunt to these people anyway, because they can say, yeah, the odds aren't great, but we're going to do what we can. And then selling more sheep hunts than they probably should. And that seems kind of sleazy.
Oh, absolutely, it does. You got to look at it that, like, something for me that I never understood is, like, when it comes to commercial fishing, and if you work on, a US based fishing vessel that trawls or something like that, it, knowing that, like, you make your living off of a renewable resource, but at the same time you're ruining other species of animals, or at least putting a dent in them for other people to not be able to do it. It's like, how could you make your money off of nature and then not care about it
Yeah.
in a way that makes sense to anybody?
There's an area that is off limits for halibut fishing because it's been deemed a halibut like nursery. But the trawlers can fish it for pollock because it's pollock fishery, and then you get all this halibut bycatch. So it's just, whoa, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why the heck is this open for pollock, but not for halibut? And you allow people to fish for pollock knowing that halibut are going to be a bycatch. So if you're going to fish for halibut and at least use it and sell it, That's good. But then wasting it just seems like the biggest, most ridiculous slap in the face and stupidest regulation ever.
Yeah, especially when there's no slap on the wrist or recourse or anything for those people to not be incentivized to just say, fuck it, I'm going to do whatever I want
Yeah. Well,
and catch it that way and have millions and millions of pounds of bycatch that are just thrown overboard. And those fish are well dead and they're not going to come back.
yeah. Yeah, the fishing thing's a whole different ball game there. All right, so back to land here. Um, your prospects going forward. Like, are you excited, hopeful for the future? You know, if you live through the transition, you can look back and think, yeah, things were easier, things were this. I remember times before the proliferation of social media and all these shows and whatnot. Um, do you think the future is it's optimistic? Are you excited? I know people talk about we're in a lull with the sheep up there, but the population will probably recover. And since the full curl requirements have been a good way of managing, sheep might look good in the future. Who knows about caribou? How do you feel about the future?
I think it'll still be fine. You know, it will probably take years, especially for something like sheep, where it's like it takes 8 years for a sheep that's born this year to be huntable, potentially. You know, it it'll take a long time for sheep numbers to come back into what they were in 2018, 2019. Because my specific area where I've hunted several times now, you know, in 2018, we saw double digit rams and multiple that were legal and, you know, and everything. And so if there's low recruitment rates for lambs and everything, it'll just take time. Hopefully, you know, they'll have a few mild winters and things will bounce back and everything. But they were saying that, you know, like at a healthy population, there will be, for sheep to continue their population, there needs to be about a 40 to 100, 40 lambs for every 100 ewes to continue the course and, you know, stay populated. If there's 60 lambs to every 100 ewes, the population will grow. According to the aerial surveys that were done this year, in some places there were 12 lambs to every 100 ewes. So it's just extremely low. And it's all that is going to take is time for the animals to not be stressed and overweathered, to be able to recruit those lambs and have them live. And, you know, that doesn't account for the first couple of years where they might get predated from anything: wolves, golden eagles, wolverines, coyotes. You know, it'll just take time.
Yeah.
Hopefully the weather will allow for that to happen. But overall, I think I'm optimistic. You know, I'm not chomping at the bit to go sheep hunting next year, because that's just, you know, I go sheep hunting every other year. But I'm excited for 2025 because I'm going to go again regardless. But it's just one of those things where it's just if you don't go because, oh, numbers are down, then, you know, you could lose an opportunity to not go and not see those mountains and just be out there and have fun and walk your feet into bones and everything. And but yeah, it'll just take time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good to be optimistic. If you get pessimistic and you get angry about everything, then it's going to ruin your flavor of everything. And then when you actually do get out there, there might be that desperation, so you don't even enjoy the experience. And you know, even with the pissing and moaning about shows and about attention and everything, that's not going to go away. It's just maybe drawing attention to people who are the content makers of the future to have your experience, but just maybe let's preserve these opportunities for other people, um, and then maybe not share every single thing. But you know, that's a personal ethic. You can't mandate that, so it's just, you know, kind of is what it is.
Yeah, and if you try and start regulating, you know, having a reactionary rebuttal to that kind of a thing, it could backfire real easily, because
Mm-hmm.
there is a proposal put forth to limit sheep harvest based on age, that was put forth this year, which is like one of the most ridiculous things ever. It's like, okay, so you can no longer shoot shoot a sheep based on age. So it's, that can effectively shut off some areas of certain ranges just based on genetics, where it's like, okay, well, that sheep will live to 13 and never become full curl. But you know what? That's dang near Boone and Crockett sheep,
Hmm.
like down in the Chugach, like some of those big governor tags that have been sold the past few years. They're barely full curl and they're like 12 years old and just monster rams. And it's the same thing with other ranges where it's like, okay, yeah, their genetics will never let them become full curl,
Hmm.
but they'll be legal for several years before they die of old age.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the attitude we have to have going forward is one where we're going to be working together and be logical and make sure that we represent what's going on well. Because if we just start to get knee jerk reactions and knee jerk, regulations, then things are going to get worse and worse. So in order to be optimistic, we got to work together. Got to be, I don't know, just work together. I guess that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's tough because they closed down another sheep area this past year, like 3 or 4 days before it opened for the season. So I think they closed it on like August 6th or 7th. And it's like this particular area, there's only like 1 to 4 rams taken on any given year. 4 would be like a fantastic year for this hyper specific spot. And it's like it's a not a big pocket of mountains. They're far away and very isolated, and you either have to, like I have one of my coworkers, that's where he has hunted for the past 15 years, and he's taken 10 plus sheep out of there. But it's, he has a cabin on the river, so he'll jet boat 40 miles up to his cabin and then take his airboat another 90 miles upriver,
Nice.
and then he'll walk 40 miles. And
Yeah.
so shutting it down for him, specifically is pretty silly. But for someone who does it like that, where they have one spot that they know of and they go back to that area, and they see, well, shoot, I only saw 4 sheep and they were all lambs and ewes, and I saw one young ram, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't necessarily put a sour taste in his mouth. It's just a reality of the weather that's been hitting that population hard.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I'm still excited. I'm optimistic for the future. The realities are that there's populations that are down. We have closures of all these things, but I know you kind of have to have confidence going forward that things are going to work out. Populations will recover, and as long as we don't subdivide ourselves as hunters, then hopefully we can get some common sense regulations and we can preserve our opportunities going forward.
Yeah, it's just taking it one year at a time and maybe focusing on another species of animals for a few years going forward before you really want to try and do something that's going to take the majority of your season away. Or like if you want to plan like a 2 week sheep hunt, and then all of a sudden that dwindles down, well, there's 2 weeks of your hunting season gone, and it's like, okay, what else can I focus on through the year? And if you focus on one thing, you may not be able to hunt something else for that year, on a personal basis or something. And so you got to figure out what you want to target, what the success rates are, what that population's doing, what the closures are regarding that area for that animal and everything. And it we're living in a tricky time
Yeah.
for certain animals.
Yeah. And if I end up not doing it, that's my fault. It's not Gritty's fault. It's not Ranello's fault. It's not anybody else's fault. I think that's a lot of the complaining that goes on, or people who don't make anything happen. And that's stupid.
Yeah,
Those are
I mean,
contributing factors, but that's one of the curveballs. That's one of the things that you have to deal with. Like ultimately, if I don't sheep hunt, that's on me. That's not on anybody else.
yeah, and being out there is, for me, that's what it's about more than anything else. Like, I love eating wild game meat. My family loves eating it. I don't care how much money I end up spending to get that animal. I never figure what the price per pound is of meat that I bring back. I never take that into account. I just like being out there more than anything.
Yeah,
And so if you don't get out there to do it, then it's like, that's on you.
yeah. What type of life are you living? It's something that you enjoy doing, and you're living a great life that's fulfilling. Like that in itself is priceless. And then, of course, all that other good cliche type stuff. But
Oh yeah.
Well, it's about time for me to get ready for school. So, Adventure Survival Lit. Got 2 periods of it, man. We're going through all these great books, and it's fun thing to teach. It makes me want to go sheep hunting, but I gotta wait.
Yeah, I like your adventure lit book list. It was really cool.
Yeah, we'll have to do
Shadows on the Koyukuk, Alaska's Wolf Man, all that good stuff.
yeah, we gotta have a separate podcast just about that. Talk about those.
That'd be fun.
Cool. All right, man. Thanks for being on. Appreciate it, and stay warm.
Hey, thanks.